You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. The time is 7 p.m, which can mean only one thing. Another 60 minutes of Skills World Live. How was your socially distanced bank holiday weekend? Did you get a chance to celebrate the VE commemorations? Maybe you were that person after a few too many rounds of the conga in your back garden that broke out in full Vera Lynn song, totally ruining an otherwise inspirational version of We'll Meet Again. Or perhaps you found yourselves tripping the like fantastic with a neighbour, dancing 2 meters apart of course, to the Van Allen Special House Music Mix, played on this show only last Friday. Not to worry folks, if you did neither, because Tom Bewick, your regular community radio DJ, is back in the hot seat as we look forward to another week of connecting the world of FE. And we've got a really interesting show coming up tonight with some, of course, really interesting guests. Stand Up for Skills is back this week, as in the closing segment of the show, my fab colleague, Kirstie Donnelly of City and Guilds fame, wrestles the mic from me to jump on her campaign soapbox yet again. We'll also be debating whether all this successful online teaching going on right now in our FE colleges should become the mainstream in future. Indeed, perhaps rather than bricks and mortar, maybe we should replace all those lecturers and physical college buildings with clicks and mortarboards instead. Did you like that pun? Bricks and mortar, clicks and mortarboards. Anyway, enough of my poor, terrible sense of humour. It is the start of the week after all. A note to self, don't give Kelly O'Mara and soon to be Gavin O'Mara, when he takes up the cudgels of becoming editor of this fine FE News production from next Monday, don't give them any further excuses to fire me for an already dubious performance as the presenter of this show. Moving swiftly on, let's find out what's been making the news headlines in the world of FE this evening. Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons earlier that the UK will be adopting a new 5-stage alert system for tackling the coronavirus. While announcing the loosening of some social distancing restrictions in England, he also said that people should go back to work if they were unable to work from home. On schools, the Prime Minister said that there would have to be a phased introduction for pupils, starting with years 1, 6 and 10 pupils from the 1st of June at the earliest. The government's COVID-19 recovery plan document, also published today, states that secondary schools and further education colleges should be ready to establish some face-to-face contact with students from June, particularly for years 10 and 12 pupils who will face key exams next year. Some teacher unions and opposition politicians have criticised the latest plans as confusing. In other news, the Liberal Democrat education spokesperson Layla Moran is leading a cross-party campaign calling on the government to help students who find themselves in dire circumstances, including taking action to prevent students from becoming homeless by ramping up mental health support and offering COVID-19 maintenance grants. The cross-party group of MPs have raised concerns that students who have no support network and find themselves extremely isolated are at risk of homelessness and potentially unable to access essential services. And finally, Southwark College is offering free online courses to help individuals learn new skills and improve existing ones so they can enter or re-enter the workplace. The new employability short courses will support job seekers to increase confidence and boost their CVs. The college said that the courses have been specifically designed to ensure that the content matches the skills required and valued by employers. Learners can benefit from the free courses by learning at home. The online courses are available in a range of subjects including IT, support work in schools, customer service, business administration and functional skills in English and maths. That's all your Skills World News from fenews.co.uk. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Bewick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111. Thomas Skielberg, When I Found Your Love. And regular listeners to this show will know that he's a Swedish artist that we're rather fond of here in the Skills World Live team. He's a regular contributor from that independent music site, epidemicsound.com. So head over to there if you want to see the range of tracks that we could be playing on this show. You can always stick in a request. Now, tonight's big debate is on the theme of whether face-to-face teaching and learning will be less needed in future, as the current crisis has brought about the need to provide more virtual teaching solutions. Of course, there is nothing new about the idea of online learning. It's been around ever since the internet was invented. In recent years, we've seen the advent of MOOCs. That's an acronym. MOOCs, or massive online, open online courses. You see how I messed that up then? I'm going to say it again. MOOCs, massive open online courses. Students who have never even been or would get the chance to attend prestigious universities like Harvard and Cambridge have been able to tune into lectures by famous philosophers and world-class academics. Indeed, there are now college institutions, particularly in the United States, where regulation obviously is a bit different there to in the UK, where it's been possible to secure online diplomas and degrees without ever stepping foot in the physical surroundings of the college that enrolled you. Indeed, even the Open University in Britain, which when it was first launched in the late 1960s, was originally called the University of the Air, because at its heart was the concept of distant and blended learning, regardless of a student's background or their financial circumstances. There are now estimated to be over 900 universities in the world offering more than 11,000 MOOCs between them, for an audience of at least 100 million students. Two top providers of MOOCs, Coursera and edX, have more than 55 million registered student users between them. That's only 10 million short of the entire population of the United Kingdom. An online master's degree in global logistics from Coventry University, for example, via FutureLearn, can set you back £15,800, while a master's degree in business administration from Boston University will cost at least $24,000. Not cheap. And inevitably, because there is big business to be made from this growing market, in both developing as well as advanced economies, the MOOC and online virtual learning movement has also attracted a lot of negative press. Some critics argue that online degrees, for example, are open to fraud and scams because it can be hard to verify the individuals taking the courses. What if they've paid someone to do all the modules and online tests for them? Some educationalists say that online courses, in isolation, is just not the best way for people to learn or how the brain likes to learn. What people need instead, they argue, is more of a blended learning experience. This is where the interaction of physical teaching and coaching is supplemented online with things like catch-up courses for students, where, for example, they may have missed their physical lectures. And don't we remember that old tale? When we come back, after this short musical break, I'll be talking to a number of FE experts in this area, including a retired college principal who has made it his life's work to convince other FE college principals and ministers to embrace the digital revolution. I'll be kicking off tonight's big debate by talking to the AOC's point man on these issues. Stay tuned, folks. David Corke is coming up after this track, carefully selected from the Skills World Live independent music site of choice, epidemicsound.com. That's Andreas Bolt, and the track's called Horizon on Fire. Now, to expand our horizons, and in particular to talk about tonight's big debate theme about online learning, I'm delighted that we're joined by the AOC's point man on the subject, amongst other subjects, of course. David Corke has 15 years of experience in FE, senior management, and is responsible for education and skills policy at the Association of Colleges. Good evening, David.
Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How's your COVID-19 experience going?
Oh, well, homeschooling is difficult with three young boys, as I'm sure lots of people could confirm.
Yes,
very difficult.
Well, snap. Well, I've got 3 kids, but not 3 boys. Alas, 2 daughters and a boy is probably about enough for me. But anyway, David, thanks for joining us. And look, given the Prime Minister's announcements earlier, can I just ask you what the AOC's response has been so far? I mean, I note, for example, that Boris Johnson is anticipating some face-to-face contact taking place for Year 12 students from early June.
Yeah, I mean, the implications of yesterday's announcement and then today's subsequent announcements are huge for the sector. I mean, if you look at not just the Year 12, but actually the Year 10s, I mean, the Year 10s alone are 15,000 learners in alternative provision that's based in colleges for 14 to 16. So a huge group. For the Year 12s, it could be about half the cohort. So the first thing is we need clarity, and we know that this is coming from the department because we've been talking to them about what Year 12 means in a college context, because of course that's not really language that we use, and there are going to be lots of people that are halfway through a 2-year level 3 course. There's going to be lots of people that have done a level 1 and a level 2 course. So what does it mean? And then what does it mean in terms of returning? Does it mean that people are going to be coming in full time for 1 week and then another week back at home, or is it half a week each? You know, there's going to be lots of coordination and lots of implications, and then the knock-on effect that will have. I can, just from a personal perspective, the knock-on effect that my Year 6 son will have on going back in terms of schooling, homeschooling and childcare arrangements and work arrangements, considering my wife is a key worker, will be very complex. So the implications are massive for the sector and the parents of children that study in the sector as well. So it's going to be complicated, and what will matter is the clearer guidance, which is on its way.
When do you expect that guidance? I mean, I was scratching around on the DfE website after the Prime Minister's House of Commons
it's not out yet.
No,
it's
the sooner the better, though. Yeah, by the sounds of it. Lots of unanswered questions. I think there's a general sort of consensus emerging that at best these latest announcements have probably led to quite a bit of confusion, and if anything, as many more questions as indeed it's answered. However, let's press on with tonight's big debate, and we're looking at the whole subject of whether the online learning revolution can or indeed should replace face-to-face teaching. Now, I know you're a qualified teacher in your distant past. I mean, what do you say to those digital evangelists out there who want to make your profession redundant?
I'm not sure that that's what people are saying to begin with. I mean, blended seems to be the best way forward for many young people and for many adults. I think there are some subjects that can be disrupted, but that there are many that can't. I mean, we've done a sector-wide survey on the transition to online during this.
All right. What's that told you then?
So lots of institutions, both for young people and for adults, have adapted exceptionally well to having to deliver either support or tutorials or lectures online, or to set work. So that there's been a huge shift, in a paradigm shift in terms of adoption, but you know that it's going to be difficult in some subject areas, and I'm sure lots of awarding bodies would say the same as well, wouldn't they? That it's difficult to train and provide full engagement in performing arts, catering, some of the sciences,
vehicle maintenance.
You
can do an MOT on a virtual car, I suppose, but ultimately you've got to still got it under the bonnet.
things like gas safe and electrical. There are many trades or practical aspects of trades where it's going to be difficult to shift some of those elements online, and I don't think anybody's really suggesting that. I mean, what I'm really worried about is actually the students and the disengagement that there might be for some students, and family and friends that not all, some of them in colleges, some of them not in colleges, where their children are saying that it's really hard to motivate their youngster that's on a second year of an A level, or someone that's resitting English and maths.
I mean, that's the point, though. There's just worth dwelling on for a moment, because obviously both of us have got 3 young kids, in the education system, including I think you've got a teenager, haven't you, as well as
one teenager.
So right, so we both got one teenager. Now, the thing that I can't quite fathom is that they are, as a generation, obviously they're digitally savvy. They're not from the analog generation like you and I. We've had to adapt to digital, and that's just putting it sort of politely, I guess. But
I was born digital. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good for you. Well, I'm not. I mean, I've had to make the transformation, but however, and not always very well. But however, I watched my son and how he learns a lot of stuff that he's interested in online. He goes to YouTube. He goes to all these various sites where he can just consume whatever content, whatever entertainment that he wants. But trying to get him then to use online whilst homeschooling, with some of the assignments that have been sent, and trying to get him into, for example, his history, the latest one being all the events surrounding 1066, was actually quite difficult. So what is it about the way young people interact with online? It seems to be very easy when it's about entertaining and something that's of interest, perhaps a bit harder if, when it's actually about trying to translate formal learning into online learning. Or is that just my teenage son? I don't know.
I think this is always going to be partly personal and partly down to what the institution has done. So we've got 3 young people at 3 different institutions, and I can see a big significant difference in how they've sequenced the learning and how they build on different learning activities in the same way that you would do in the classroom. So I think it's about cognitive load. I think it's about sequencing. I think it's about how we structure content for it, whether it be online or not, to deliver the best learning possible. And therein lies the issue, is that some of it just can't be reinforced through practical learning and assessment. We can't forget assessment here, can we? That we need to assess people in the best way possible, and that's not always writing an essay or sitting a test, is it? It's sometimes
sure. Well, and it can certainly be done increasingly online, and that's maybe a point we'll move on to, certainly in some of the later debates we're going to have this evening, about the extent to which regulations catching up with some of these innovations. But can I just focus for a moment on the digital infrastructure in further education colleges? I mean, obviously at the AOC, you've got that peak level overview of what's going on. I mean, do you think that there will be some college principals out there who will be sort of smarting, perhaps, that they didn't make the investment in the shift to online learning like MOOCs much sooner, and arguably others have? I mean, is that what's sorting out potentially those colleges at the moment that are able to adapt and respond, or do you think they're all just as good as each other?
That it would be silly to say that they're all as good as each other, because it's just not possible, is it? The same applies to schools as it does to universities. I mean, I think the underlying infrastructure with the Janet network through JISC is a good starting point, because it provides a good backbone and is resilient. I think that there's more that we can do from a content perspective. The Blended Learning Consortium does a brilliant job of collectively trying to get the sector to democratically build blended learning content for everybody's purpose. I think we need to develop and adopt new assessment methodologies, especially when we think about proctoring from an awarding body perspective. There's going to have to be changes there. And then when we think about automation and digital assistance, automated workflows, data analytics, that sort of flexible working, I really hope that we can utilise some of those technologies to try and make the roles of teachers as meaningful as possible, and reducing any reliance on meaningless tasks for teachers. So that's where I think some of the paradigm shift can bite. But what will be interesting is whether we fall back into the ways we've always done things, or whether we move forward. And that will require investment, especially in for teachers and CPD, to build confidence and to build the skills that the teachers there need, because it's not always been invested in.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the funding, the investment, and the kind of regulatory side. I mean, I've just got just over a minute left of this segment to talk to you about it. But in your view, do you think that current funding policy, thinking ESFA, colleges, regulatory, Ofqual, but there are others as well, I mean, are they a help or are they a hindrance, really, in terms of this shift to online learning, which, whatever the merits of it in terms of people's relative views of that debate, blended versus online versus physical, bricks and mortar, and all of that, without a doubt, the trend and the shift to online learning will continue. But is there a lag, I guess, between the new technologies that get adopted, that will need to be adopted, and the extent to which funding policies and regulatory policies try and keep pace?
I think investment is obviously key, and you'd expect.
Do you think it should be a dedicated fund then for digital, for FE, around investment?
There should be. No, there isn't. I mean, I think obviously we've got the capital fund that will be released in the near future, and that could possibly be spent more on a digital estate. I mean, we've done a few surveys, and we've got one that's soon to be published in a matter of weeks with DFE and GISC on investment. It's a series of surveys that we've done, and it shows that investment has been suffering as margins have become tighter. And we're just again publishing a new adult funding paper on contribution and how difficult it is to run resource intensive adult courses, because the funding is so woeful. So I think that if we want to see a shift towards digital, if we want to see a shift towards more technical and professional education, then we're going to need the investment to realise that.
David Corke, Senior Policy Manager at the Association of Colleges. Pleasure, as ever, talking to you. Thanks for joining Skills World this evening.
Thank you.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
Well, that rather funky track is called Sun-Kissed. Some of us enjoyed a sun-kissed weekend, didn't we? Depending on what part of the country you were in. That was a track by Daniel Friedel. Now, regular listeners to my show might be thinking, that was a bit different from Tom. I mean, it's not my usual repertoire of uplifting house music tracks. Well, when I saw my partner, Jade, who I'm sure at some point will listen to this. Anyway, when I saw her strutting about the kitchen to that track the other day, doing the full-on funky chicken walk, I just had to play it. So, boss of the house, that track was for you. Now, moving on to tonight's big debate, I'm delighted to be joined by two sector experts. Bob Harrison is a former college principal but has had a distinguished FE career and currently is chair of governors at the Northern College for Adults. And joining him is Sam Blyth, who's a senior director at Instructure, which is a US-based company with operations all over Europe. Good evening to you both.
Hi Tom, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. And Sam on the line still?
Yep, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening. So obviously our ICT is working at the moment, so that's a good start, isn't it? Bob,
sure.
Bob, let's start with you. In a recent article you said, and I'll quote, the remote working, online blended virtual learning and assessment genie is well and truly out of the bottle, close quotes. Tell us more about what you meant by out of the bottle.
Well, I think Sam and I were just having that discussion before we came on air, and it's a bitter irony for me, a bittersweet irony that having spent 20 years trying to persuade politicians, policymakers, head teachers, and principals. I was on the ETAG committee, the Ministerial Advisory Committee, and the FELTAG Advisory Committee, and I've spent a lot of my life, and I think that first TES article that I started.
Was that back in when was that? 2012 or was that before?
2012, which was where the paradigm pioneers, and what I was conscious about was that, a different way of thinking, and we needed to think differently. Because if you think about it, Tom, and you know the history of the further education sector, and Sam's heard me preach this at the presentations that I do, that, the design principles upon which the FE sector is predicated came out of the Industrial Revolution. So the design principles are predominantly predicated on the industries that were dominant at the time. So shipbuilding, coal, steel, manufacturing, textiles, and they all have a particular process type of thinking. So, people turn up, they're given some knowledge and information, then they're tested, then the quality assured, then they're sent out. And I don't think, and my thesis for the past 20 years is that whole process is no longer fit for purpose in a digital age. And what's particularly a bittersweet irony for me is that having spent 20 years, banging my head against a brick wall, managed to persuade some people, not everybody. And the last 10 years have been particularly difficult with the DFE and the way that they think about, or have up until recently thought about, education technology. That a virus comes along, and in 3 weeks, does more than I've been able to do in 20 years.
Well, I think you're being too hard on yourself, Bob. I thought you were very self-deprecating, actually, in your TES article about that. As if like you spent wasted the last sort of 20 years of your life. I don't think that's the case at all. I get your point.
I don't think I've wasted it, but I have to say, as the Buddhist in me, as I approach the end of my life, if I'm reincarnated, I'm coming back as a virus, because it means I can get there a lot quicker than the 20 years. But sure. I sincerely did mean, I think the genie is out of the bottle. For some people, it's been out for some time, and there's some fantastic work goes on. Some of Sam's customers and clients, that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years, and some of the real pioneers, the FELTAG pioneers, the Grimsby Institute. I mean, I'm a judge for the TES FE Awards, and we've had to postpone the awards this year. The outstanding use of technology. Eight shortlisted, absolutely fantastic things. But as a system, as a sector, well, it's not a system, is it? It's a sector. I don't think we've been making the full use of technology. There's all sorts of good reasons for that.
Well, let's make this a three-way debate and bring Sam Blyth in now from Instructure. Because I know you had a great chat with her off air, but let's for the benefit of our listeners, bring her in. Now, Sam, you've obviously you're part of a global company that's all about providing information technology services to education. There are many FE college staff who will listen to this, who will be very familiar, obviously, with the Canvas system that your company devised. But what are the biggest changes have you seen in FE since the COVID-19 crisis broke?
Well, I think firstly, from our view, we think that the FE sector has actually been really well placed, better than some others, to adapt to the last couple of months. And when I was thinking about why that might be, I feel that the focus that FE has on particularly adult learners and hard to reach learners, and that whole difficulty with balancing your family and your probably work with your learning, has meant that they've had to embrace technology and had to embrace kind of innovation and creativity, perhaps faster than some other sectors of education. So we would certainly see the FE sector as one of the areas that have had a stronger and quicker kind of movement towards wholly online. But I think if I was to kind of signpost one of the biggest changes we've seen, it's in staff. There's always innovators, like Grimsby Institute, like Activate Learning, who've been on a really long transformation and have invested a lot in their staff. But to kind of reflect on what Bob said, I would say COVID has supercharged individuals who have had to come really out of their comfort zone for their students and embrace, how on earth do I do this online learning? So I would say it's kind of the will of the FE sector and particularly individual teachers to really go that extra mile and go out of their comfort zone to support their teachers. And tools like Canvas really facilitate that. The teachers are the ones that make the learning happen. The tools should do the heavy lifting. They get out of the way.
Yeah, and I've been in a lot of FE colleges over the years, and I've noticed quite a few of them, well, a lot of them seem to use Canvas. I mean, is that an almost universal virtual learning platform, or is it something that you're in competition with others to provide the FE sector?
Yeah, we are very strong in FE. I think, we have a fantastic community and Bob's been a member of that. And we've supported Bob in what he's done and really tried to showcase what the digital world can do to help, not only the students, but also the workforce. I'd love to say it's universal, not quite universal yet.
Okay.
But I think what we try and do is to really focus on the communication, the feedback, the really giving tools to help the teachers get that, do the heavy lifting, help with those admin tasks, grade people quickly, but also give really kind of authentic feedback. And I think that's going to be one of the strongest things that come out of this huge change. It's the ways in which students with each other, but also with their kind of lecturers and teachers can still be a learning community.
Okay. But I want to come back to you, and I want to raise the M word, as in for ministers, because again, you've obviously spent time over the years bending ministers' ears. Sometimes they've listened to you. Matt Hancock obviously got you involved in a group, and then Nicky Morgan became Secretary of State and arguably didn't listen to you. Yeah. But if you were, if Gavin Williamson was just knocking down your door now and saying, Bob, just give me that one piece of wisdom about where we go now with online learning in the FE sector, what would you say to him, guarantee that he's absolutely going to implement everything you tell him?
Well, I think the only question I would ask you, Tom, posing that hypothetical, is: have you been on drugs before you started this conversation? Because I think
those days are over. Yeah,
I am persona non grata as far as and I'm very happy with that because I've been very critical of the EdTech strategy. I think it's got a little bit better. I've been very critical of...
You're very vocal on social media as well with some of your professional opponents.
Pedagogy you like. But I tell you what I would say, what I would say to him, if he asked me, and I don't know if you saw the Oak National...
we've had them on the show. We interviewed them a couple of days ago, actually.
Right.
We saw that.
This is what I would say to Gavin Williams if I ever got the opportunity. I think... They need to make a distinction and get a grasp and an understanding of this very fundamental concept. There is a fundamental difference between online schooling, online teaching, and online learning. It was interesting the way that you've posted this debate, and a great headline. Is it? Well, no. Well, it's a good clickbait headline. I think I thought you might have been coached by Nick Linford at FE Week or something. To get some good clickbait. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, it's not. It's a false premise, and I've taken issue with Tom Bennett and Daisy Christodoulou about this. It's tech or teachers. It's never been tech or teachers.
Sure.
It's always been teachers plus tech. So I think this idea and the research. I referred. There's two big meta studies. One was done about 10 years ago in the United States, and the other one came out last week by the Education Endowment Foundation. And predominantly, they've looked at every bit of research that there is about online, face-to-face and blended learning. And basically, it's not a case of it's either online or face-to-face.
Well, I think that's the big message that's coming out, and it's not an either or. I mean, I think,
absolutely.
all the contributors are making the point. But I think, as you say, that's what the literature tells you as well. Blended learning is really the way forward. It's not an either or, is it?
But I think, picking up on Sam's point about the workforce skills, and why the FE has been more agile. I mean, that was one of the key verbs that we used in FELTAG, was about agility and evolution. Yeah. But one of the key things is, I think adult educators and further they won't get away with online teaching. They have to think about how people learn, and it's a different skill set. So I think the workforce development issue is about not how do we take what we're currently doing and put it online. It's how do we understand how to. What are the pedagogical issues about online learning? Now, you work for an award in a bodies association, and I spoke at last year's e-assessment awards.
Good.
And that's a whole other ballgame. It is. And alas, somewhere else.
And alas, Bob, we don't have time to get into that ballgame because I just want to give 20 seconds to Sam just to sort of give me your closing thoughts about this whole big debate, about teachers versus online learning. Where's Instructure?
And I would back up all of the research at Bob and say that you shouldn't have to choose. Institutions should enable their students, but also their teachers to develop their own skills to be able to do both. But they are different, and you can't just replace one with the other in 2 days or 3 months. They're different, and I think what I hope comes from this is that there'll be an even closer kind of synergy between industry, colleges, and tech suppliers like Canvas to really hone in on what's going to make the difference going into 21.
Great. Well, let's end on that really positive note about synergy and all working together. Thanks to you both. Pleasure. Great debate. Cheers.
Tom.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
Okay, stay tuned because after this musical break, it's time for the regular and weekly intake of Stand Up for Skills with Kirstie Donnelly. So that's Enzo there by Jones Meadow. I think we've played that track on the show before as well. Lovely little track there from epidemicsound.com. Now, our final segment of the show. It's that time of the week when also I get a little rest and I can hand over to my fab colleague and, of course, of City and Guilds fame, Kirstie Donnelly, MBE. Evening, Kirstie.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, it's
good.
I think it's been great debate tonight so far on the show. I don't think I had a chance to listen to any of the contributions.
Yeah, I have done. No. Very interesting what Bob and Sam were saying, and also David earlier. All interesting existential stuff happening at the moment, isn't there? Really, Tom?
Yeah.
In our sector.
Indeed. So, talking of existential, then, why don't I let you take away the segment for this week of hashtag Stand Up for Skills.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. Well, listen, I'm delighted. I'm going to be joined in a moment by Shaun Hope, who's assistant principal at Hartlepool College, and are doing some great things, really, where they've been tackling head on, really, this big existential question that's facing FE and the college sector and providers more generally, which has the FE skills system, have we finally now been tipped into online as a new norm? And what will that mean for the future of FE, not just as physical places to teach and learn, but more this concept of college without walls? So in a moment, I'm going to be going to Shaun with a few of those questions about some of the opportunities and challenges that face the college sector. It's interesting to hear Bob earlier talk about the fact it's not a binary choice, it's about the blend. But I do think we have hit through COVID this tipping point, really, where we have to face it. We probably need to swing the pendulum much more to the extreme of taking things online and digitally before it swings back into the middle. And the whole purpose of Stand Up for Skills, just to remind our great listeners, is it's an important campaign to help us think about our transition out of COVID, where we're going to need a skills ecosystem even more so that's going to actually help with the various challenges of unemployment and underemployed. And that's a skill system that's got to work together. So collaborating and curating and sharing content is going to be really, really important. So Shaun, bringing you in now, I mean, and thank you again for giving up your time this evening. But
you're very welcome.
I was really struck by a statement I read a few years ago now, which sort of out of a piece of research said very clearly, by 2030, the largest internet business in the world will be in education. So if we're to believe that, and that looks like that could well be on the cards, what do you see and imagine the next decade or so might bring for how FE and how a college has to fit into that vision?
Good question, Kirstie, and thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. As you said, it's been great to listen to Bob, Sam and David and Tom as they debate this. I think you mentioned the word norm there. The norm now I'm not too sure whether this will be the norm going forward, but the norm now is that we've got hundreds of students, thousands of students online all day, every day, completing their work, and have quite successfully made that transition to online engagement. So that set us up, if you like, for what the future will hold.
Yeah. So you're not going to go back? You don't see yourself going back then, Shaun, in that respect?
I think the great work that's going on with the awarding bodies at the minute sort of typifies what will happen going forward. We've got those three different strands of how qualifications will be calculated at the minute. And those qualifications that are heavily practical, I can't see those moving to online delivery. And there was some great examples earlier on of the likes of motor vehicle. We can't see that moving to online delivery. But there are some, and it's made us realise that we've been set up for this, we've been prepared for this, and we can move some assessment to online. I say assessment because the proof is not there yet whether that is actual learning. It's just assessment at this moment in time.
But there's always been a need, though, to draw together the learning and assessment domain much more closely. And surely digital online, the use of online proctoring, thinking very differently, notwithstanding the point you just made about there may be some sectors where it's very difficult or it's very expensive. It would be possible maybe to do motor vehicle in some extent through simulations, but we know that's quite expensive. But there's got to be a new opportunity to rethink how we take our learners through a whole end-to-end learning cycle, surely.
Yeah, I agree, Kirstie. And to build on what Sam was saying, I don't think that it's a new, fresh opportunity. It's more utilising the opportunity that was already there. the whole sector was prepared for this. We all had some form of blended learning. We've just increased the volume of that blended learning, and we've seen more qualifications than probably what we would have accepted without a little bit of a push like we've had at the minute. It can actually move online, and again, stress for assessment, not necessarily for learning.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, what is the one thing that would really give you confidence that you could do even more of what's done in a college online? What's the one ingredient or the one thing you feel that you're missing right now?
Well, the real challenge, and to stress it once again, is that the learning. And learning is that transfer of knowledge and information to long-term memory. And it's too early in that process to see if we've been successful in doing that. It's also too early to see whether we're just seeing a transaction of information from one side to another rather than necessarily genuine learning taking place.
And I think that's and there's going to be some great longitudinal studies that we absolutely all should get behind as a sector. And as you say, really look and watch that. That said, there is plenty of research out there in the world at large. There are plenty of other countries that are showing us and leading the way that do demonstrate effective learning and assessment through online.
They do, yes, they're right, and some of those have been mentioned this evening. But some of those areas are pitched at a certain level of student and a certain type of student. Often this type of student that's coming back because of career ambitions, and that is a qualification, not education. And the separation I want to make from that is it's a qualification, as in it's a means to an end to go somewhere. Lots of the learners who engage in colleges and come through those doors, we educate them on things much wider than the qualification they get. They become good citizens, get social skills, team building, leadership, and so on, that they get from the face-to-face interaction.
No, that's a very good point. And just on that point about engagement, and because obviously we're not far away from your summer recruitment cycle, I mean, how much are you going to take that online now as well, given the current situation and extensions of lockdown?
Solely online, I think, will be the answer. Obviously, we wait for more guidance and nuances in amongst the guidance that we've got at the minute, but we're preparing to move our online summer recruitment online, and that'll be virtual open events. There'll be interaction via Teams and Zoom and so on to do interviews and carry out lots of sort of taster activities as well.
Great. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Shaun. I know that Tom will be eager waiting to get back to his DJ decks.
Thank you very much, Kirstie.
Lead the discussion a bit. Thanks very much, Shaun. And I think that this is a conversation, a debate that's going to rumble on for many, many months to come. But I think we've certainly had the tipping point now. And back to you, Tom.
Indeed. And let us know your thoughts, listeners, on the hashtag Stand Up for Skills as well. And Kirstie Donnelly of City and Guilds, and Shaun Hope, Assistant Principal, Hartlepool College. Thanks very much indeed for leading that segment this week.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. So we're about out of time for another episode of Skills World Live. That was quite a constructive debate we had tonight. Obviously differences of opinion, but also lots of points of consensus as well. Now, tomorrow night, Skills World Live, we'll be looking at the growing concern about rising unemployment after COVID-19. Indeed, if we ever get beyond COVID-19. We'll be asking that painful question, could youth unemployment hit or even exceed 50% post the immediate crisis? I'll be talking to the author of a major report from the Resolution Foundation on that very subject, and indeed other labour market experts as well, who will help us lead that big debate theme. And don't forget that if you want to be on the show, contact us, skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Thanks as ever to the show's editor, Kelly O'Mara, and our digital producer, Ellie Hansen. Skills World Live is an FE News production supported by the Federation of Awarding Bodies and our Platinum Partners programme.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/skillsworld.